Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, our first public webinar produced by our team. My name is Katherine Lippel. I'm a professor at the Civil Law section. I have the Distinguished Research Chair in Occupational Health and Safety Law at the University of Ottawa. And I'm delighted to be able to launch this webinar series with two fantastic speakers looking at return to work and mental health. To give you an overview of what I'll be doing. This is the webinar program. I'll be speaking for a few minutes now with an introduction both to the speakers and to our team in general. And then we'll start with the first presenter, who is Dr. Louise St-Arnaud. And she will be talking about a guide to supporting return to work following a mental health problem, a workplace-focused approach. Key word is workplace there. We'll come back to that in a minute. Dr. MacEachen will follow. She will be presenting return to work and mental health, Canadian return to work coordinators' accounts of challenges and practical strategies. Keyword coordinators, and that will really be the focus of her presentation. We're going to have both presentations before we open up for questions. And please note that only written questions will be taken. I'm delighted that there are over 150 people who have registered for this webinar, but that does create technological challenges, so we won't be able to see you or hear you. And I, as moderator, will present your written questions to the speakers, as many as we can if time permits. Now, if we can't answer all the questions at the end of my slide deck, you'll be seeing an address where you can write to us. So when I say us, we're talking about a team, and this is the team, Policy and Practice in Return to Work After a Work Injury, Challenging Circumstances and Innovative Solutions. This is a healthy and productive work team financed by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and the CIHR, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. And I know that among our 150 people, we have people from the US, we have people from Texas, from New York, we have people from North Carolina, we have people from Algeria, and we have people from across Canada. And again, I'm really thrilled that we're having this broad audience. It is a Canadian-focused research program, but I think that what will be presented today is really international. In terms of its utility and relevance, because it's not triggered specifically on the law. So our team, it's a broad team. Today we're hearing from two stream leads, Dr. MacEachen, who is from the University of Waterloo, who I'll introduce in a second, and Dr. Louise St-Arnaud. But as you can see, there are many co-investigators. There are also many trainees who are involved in this team and who are on the call as well. And we have many partners, both from unions, public institutions, employers groups, and NGOs, community legal clinics, etc. So the theme of our team, the overarching question, if you like, is this, is how can Canadian public policies promote better practices to ensure sustainable return to work for all injured workers? And in one slide, this is the overview of 5 years of research. We'll be going on till at least 2023. COVID might give us a little extra time because it has created a number of challenges, but we'll be around for a while. We are examining the scope and effectiveness of regulated return to work policies applied to workers who are injured either in non-standard employment, in employment-related geographic mobility, full-time at minimum wage. But we are also interested in workers regardless of their categories and regardless of whether they have made a compensation claim, who are injured at work while they are either migrants or immigrants, or while they are attempting to return to work after having suffered a mental health problem. So today's webinar fits in with that last bullet point, and that's the context in which this presentation is being made. I have only one slide on law. I know that there are some people who are legal scholars who are on this webinar, and I just wanted to bridge the legal discourse and the legal parameters with what we're going to hear, because both our presenters are not lawyers, or neither of our presenters are lawyers, and neither of them are going to address any legal questions. So, of course, what is the context in which the interventions that we're going to hear about, because the interventions of return to work coordinators or of people who are collectively in a team trying to promote return to work, they don't take place in a vacuum. They take place in a legal context. Most important, occupational health and safety legislation. Many, but not all, of the laws in Canada protect workers' mental health. And that is certainly a driving factor in the design of ways people intervene, specialists, unions, employers. Workers' compensation legislation will be relevant if the worker has sustained a mental health problem related to work and has claimed under a workers' compensation statute. All Canadian statutes cover some form of mental health problems related to work. And the majority of the cases are not claimed for under workers' comp, but when it is a workers' comp claim, of course, there are special rules that come into play. And what we rarely hear about, but we lawyers are very aware of, first of all, if you're unionized, and close to 40% of Quebec workers are unionized, and I believe over 30% of Canadian workers are unionized, then the labor codes and, most importantly, the collective agreements associated with a specific workplace are extremely relevant sources of regulation and law and policy that are going to govern the way it's going to play out in the workplace. But even people who are not unionized, there are lots of rules in every province. And Canada, we have the pleasure of having 14 different jurisdictions with rules that are different in every jurisdiction. Labor standards legislation is an important source to see what protections are available for people who have mental health problems. Finally, in terms of law, you have human rights legislation. And what most people are usually aware of is, even if you're not trained in law, or if you're working in a workplace as such, well, there are equality rights. It's prohibited to discriminate against somebody because they have a mental health problem. It's a form of disability that is protective status under human rights legislation. And employers in Canada have the duty to accommodate the worker
Say
up
that
to a
now,
point.
Mike, but
I have the duty to accommodate up to a point of undue hardship. I'm hearing people talking in the background who are my technician supports. So I'm just saying that in case anybody else is hearing them as well. So getting back to human rights legislation, equality rights and duty to accommodate is what we usually use as a framework in law to trigger the processes we're going to be hearing about. There is also something I draw to your attention, inclusive design legislation. In Canada, federally in 2019, a new act came into force, where it was adopted in any case and sanctioned. What's important, just to make a bridge with our presenters, well, equality rights and duty to accommodate are really individual rights usually, and we're looking at accommodation of an individual. And when we listen to Ellen MacEachen's presentation, that is really the underpinning of the activities she's describing. Inclusive design legislation aspires to have workplaces that are able to accept all workers regardless of their disability or absence of disability. So if we're talking about a physical handicap, we're not talking about putting in ramps, we're talking about building a building that doesn't need special accommodations for people in wheelchairs. The same thing applies to people with mental health problems. And I would suggest that the broad spectrum of processes that Louise St-Arnaud is going to present really are an inspiration for people who want to implement inclusive design for people with mental health problems. Of course, the other regulatory frameworks are relevant as well, but I did want to draw your attention to that. In terms of our presenters, the first presenter is Dr. Louise St-Arnaud, who is a psychologist, a career counselor, and full professor at Laval University. Her research is characterized by the design and implementation of research projects in close collaboration with the practice environment. Several of her studies have focused on integration, job retention, and return to work processes following a mental health problem. For several years, she has also conducted research in the field of work psychodynamics and mental health in the workplace. And you have, and if you're on this webinar, you've received the link to her guide. She also has a French version, which is available, which was the original version, and has said that if there is an interest among people to have a presentation and a webinar in French, she would be delighted to participate in that. Our second presenter is Dr. Ellen MacEachen, who is a professor and interim director in the School of Public Health and Health Systems at the University of Waterloo, Canada. Her research examines return to work, vulnerable workers, and the growth of precarious employment, and her edited book that came out in 2019 is entitled The Science and Politics of Work Disability Prevention. It's a great book. I strongly recommend you look at it if you're interested in these issues. And there are, I think, over a dozen countries that are analyzed in that book. Dr. MacEachen sits on the Labour Market Information Expert Panel for the Labour Market Information Council of Canada, which is a federal advisory committee that provides independent advice on labour market policy and practice. And she's the president of Carwell. And you have the link to her guide. By the way, before I get, well, I guess I'm into housekeeping, but one of the first things I want to say, we are recording this session. The recording will be up on the website. The speakers have kindly agreed to share their PowerPoints as well, so that you will be able to listen to what you're hearing, and then you'll be able to eventually download the presentations and hear it again. For housekeeping part one, during the webinar, please note that all attendees of this webinar are by default only allowed to watch and listen to the webinar. As such, we cannot see or hear you. If you want to ask questions or make comments, please send a message in the Q&A section, questions and answers, at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will answer technical questions in a written format in the Q&A section. The others will be presented by the moderator during the Q&A period as time permits. That's me, Katherine Lippel. I will be moderating. After the webinar, you have the link to our team's website. If you'd like to contact us about partnering, because this is a long-term team, and if you are from an institution, a union, an employer group, an insurer, and you think that maybe some of our projects might be of interest to your business or to your union, and you would like to know more about our team and the work we've been doing, please don't hesitate to contact us. I want to underline that you will all be receiving an email with a short evaluation form. Please fill it in. This is important to us to guide next steps, and also to allow us to better meet the needs of the people who participate in these webinars. And finally, I want to give special thanks to Monique Lefebvre, our team coordinator, and to the technicians who are supporting us at the University of Ottawa. It's infinitely appreciated, because this is not our skill set. So I'm going to now turn the floor over to Dr. Louise St-Arnaud, who will be presenting the first presentation. And thank you very much.